So, welcome. Tonight's talk is called Graduate with a Debt-Free College Degree. My name's Dominique Padurano. My students and some parents call me Dr. P. I'm the president, founder, and head coach of Crimson Coaching. And I'm here with Dave Peterson, also known as Dave the Scholarship Coach, who's president, founder, and scholarship coach at Scholarship GPS. So, we decided to kind of do this talk for the simple reason, which I'm sure many of you know about, the rising costs of college between 1995, when I'm thinking maybe some of you graduated college around then, and 2020, the cost of attending college went up 142% in the public university sector and 104% in the private sector. And so by applying for scholarships and making yourself eligible to win them, you can really offset a lot of this cost. I'm going to allow Dave to kind of introduce himself when he starts talking. I'll also introduce myself, but we're so glad that you're here. Tonight's agenda, I'll be speaking first about how you can put yourself into the best academic position in order to qualify for scholarships. And then Dave will take it over to talk about scholarships themselves. We will have a Q&A at the end. You can put questions in the chat now. However, we won't be stopping during the prepared remarks to answer the questions because it's really hard to see when you're presenting on Zoom. So thank you again for being here. Just a brief introduction to myself. Many people ask, why did you name your company Crimson Coaching? Well, crimson is the color of my alma mater, Harvard. And that's me, as well as my sister in the early 90s who came to visit me. I'm sure she's a little embarrassed by those turquoise shorts, but that's okay. After graduating from Harvard, magna cum laude, I went on to get a master's in secondary ed and a PhD in history, and thus the doctor in Dr. P. And I have been teaching some combination of high school and or college really since 1997. I have been tutoring SAT since 1995, so this will be my 30th year in the field. I founded Crimson Coaching. I left full-time teaching in 2014 to found Crimson Coaching. And what we do is provide academic tutoring, and you're going to hear about the importance of getting a high GPA for scholarships tonight. We provide SAT and ACT as well as other test prep. And we'll also talk about the relevance of SAT scores to scholarships and college counseling and essay coaching. And you sort of might not think that the essay is super important either in college or scholarships. I've had students go on after doing essay coaching with me to get a full ride scholarship at St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. That was Brendan. After doing just 10 sessions of test prep. One of my students last year just was a National Merit Scholar. And Jessica Franklin, who, you know what, I'm going to actually skip Jessica's video because I don't want to take a lot of time. But Jessica wound up getting $30,000 in outside scholarships. You can see Jessica's video on the homepage of my YouTube if you're interested in her remarks. So let's go on. So the same components of a successful college application will also help you win merit aid, departmental scholarships offered by, say, the physics department at the college that you're going to apply to, and outside private scholarships. And those components are rigorous coursework, standardized tests and scores, extracurricular prowess or talent, a high GPA, successful essays, and letters of recommendation. So I'll be talking about each one of these right now. So I'm talking about coursework and GPA together because they kind of go together. So what do I mean when I say rigorous coursework? Really, we are looking at AP, Advanced Placement, or IB, International Baccalaureate courses, especially in your potential college major. So, for example, if you want to major in physics, taking AP Physics, that might also be a source of departmental money that you can apply to. And departmental money can really range. At just one school whose website I visited, there was anything from $1,000 a year to a full ride at the University of South Carolina. Just below that, in terms of rigor, is our honors courses and dual enrollment at community colleges. And a lot of people will say, well, shouldn't community college courses be ranked up with AP? The problem is, not all community colleges are created equally. And so it's really hard for colleges to gauge the rigor of the course, whereas AP and IB is a standard curriculum across the entire world. Every kid takes the same exam. And so there's a little bit more it's a neutral arbiter of students' academic rigor. If you'd like more information on choosing the right courses, especially if you are a parent of a middle or elementary school student, you can feel free to check out my YouTube, the video called Choosing the Right Middle and High School Courses for Highly Selective College Admissions. In terms of GPA, of course, you want an overall high GPA, but especially in those rigorous courses of the APs, the IB for merit aid. About 2/3 of private scholarships require a 3.0 or higher GPA. And finally, high grades in your potential major discipline. So again, if you want to major in the sciences, AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Physics, that will demonstrate both your commitment to the discipline as well as your mastery of the subject and could result in winning some departmental scholarships. For those of you whose children are still new or young, and even if they're 16 years old, I recommend highly reading Jeffrey Salingo's book, Who Gets In and Why. It is more about the admissions process, but if you were to follow his advice, I think you'll also see not only will you wind up picking the right college, but you may also be more competitive for scholarships. So, standardized test scores are often required for outside private scholarships as well as merit aid given by the colleges themselves. And again, you can feel free to go to my YouTube. I have a video about the new digital SAT. This may be news to many of you. The ACT is also going digital this year and is changing pretty dramatically. And so I'll be producing a new webinar on that I'll post on YouTube soon within the next few weeks. So when I say standardized test scores, I'm really talking about the SAT, the ACT, and if you're here in Florida, the CLT, the Classical Learning Test. As far as I know, Florida is the only state in the union that will accept the CLT instead of the SAT or ACT. But I wouldn't be surprised if more states began adopting that. And again, for those of you in Florida, the Bright Futures Scholarship Program run by the state university system in Florida will also accept the CLT for scholarship purposes as well. So your extracurricular engagement and prowess can really demonstrate so much, not just on the college application, but also for scholarships. These passions that you follow will allow you to potentially demonstrate leadership, to demonstrate service, innovation, especially if you're an entrepreneur and maybe starting your own business, as well as professionalism. So, for example, extracurricular activities do include holding a part-time job. And, if we'll talk about letters of recommendation in a sec, but if you can get a great letter from your boss, that you can show your professionalism as well. I will say that it's really important to think about as your child goes through this process to try to get them to do extracurriculars that mirror their potential major. And I'll tell you a story of a student who I worked with on his college essays and helped draft his college list well after, the junior year had ended. So kind of after the grades were in, the test scores were in, and the extracurriculars were done. And while he was a strong candidate in many respects, he never joined any sort of club or had any extracurricular related to computer science, which was his intended major. And he did get deferred from quite a few schools. Had I been his counselor earlier in the process, I, of course, would have recommended that he try to do that. So I would recommend that, you really use your extracurricular activities as a way to reflect your interest. Now, this right here is to show that if you're interested in soccer and you want to join your school soccer team, fantastic. But I will be honest and tell you that in terms of highly selective college admissions, as well as for some scholarships, you're really going to want to stand out from the pack. One way students are doing that is through impact projects. And again, you can see my YouTube more for what an impact project is. It's basically a student-led, student initiative driven project that they do outside of the school setting. And it can really help students to stand apart in the college application process, as well as scholarships. So for essays, I would say, don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you can get your college essays done early, and for my students, I always recommend that they do, you can certainly repurpose them into scholarship essays. You can also work with Dave on specific scholarship essays. You can check out my YouTube as well for how to write a great college application. I have a 10-week mini course there for free. So I'm a big proponent for both college admissions as well as for scholarships. Students really should think about cultivating relationships with their teachers, counselors, and mentors from ninth grade on. The reason why is, especially if your child's in a public school, their teacher might have 150, 200 students. Their high school guidance counselor will often have 400 students that they have to write for. If your child does not make the effort to stand out and cultivate that relationship, many teachers and counselors are just way too overburdened with their student load to do that for them. So how can they do that? Well, in class, they can participate in class. If they're introverted, they can become a good, what I call student citizen, volunteer to help other kids, take notes for a kid who might be absent, those sorts of things. I also recommend visiting a teacher during free periods or before and after school. If you need extra help, you should certainly be doing that for academic reasons, but you might also think about doing that just for social reasons to get to know your teacher and to have your teacher get to know you. For those students who can do undergraduate research or do an impact project, I serve as a mentor for both sorts of things, impact project as well as research. Those mentors can be great letter writers. Even your boss at a part-time job can really speak to your commitment, maturity, and professionalism. I recommend that from ninth grade on, students write an end of year thank you note to their teachers, telling them what they at least one thing that they learned, even if they did not like that teacher. The reason why is teachers talk. And believe me, I got lots of thank you notes for writing letters. I never once got an end of year thank you note. However, if I had, I certainly would remember that student. And I think it's just a way of getting in the habit because you never know when you might need a letter of recommendation from that person. When you do pick the people who you're going to ask for letters from, ask them early and ask them outright if they can write you a strong letter. You don't want to find out from the rejection committee of the scholarship that it wasn't a strong letter and that I mean they'll never tell you this, but if you get rejected and you think you had a strong application and it might be the letter. So ask, can you write me a strong letter? Finally, keep your letter writers posted. I can't tell you how many times I've written letters for students, and not only do they not thank me, but they never let me know if they got into the school that I wrote them a letter for. So, it's just the kind thing to do. And again, you might need another letter down the road. And if you never kept them posted in the first place, they might say, sorry, I'm too busy. Okay. There's a lot more I could say about this. Again, I'm sorry I keep kind of referring you to my YouTube, but each of these topics you can go much more into detail with. So you might want to think about starting to collect some supplemental materials, especially if you're early in high school, that will help you eventually become a stronger scholarship applicant. Again, I have a whole YouTube on video on using social media wisely. But, if you are into sports or music, you might want to think about having your own unlisted or private YouTube channel. If you're an artist, starting an Instagram or a Tumblr. And for those of you who are writers, and actually, I believe every high school student should have their own LinkedIn page. It's a way for you to keep track of your own accomplishments as you progress through ninth grade so that when you are applying to college and potentially applying for scholarships, 3 years after ninth grade, you will more easily recall because it's all in black and white what you did. So I would just say, in sort of last thoughts here, that the same qualities that earn you good grades, high scores, and leadership positions in high school are the same ones that you will help you find and win scholarships for college. And those two qualities are resilience and persistence. I'm sure Dave can attest to the fact that it takes a lot of persistence to find the right fit of a scholarship for you. And those, by doing all the things that I mentioned, getting good grades, getting high SAT scores, showing up for extracurriculars, they require persistence and resilience as well. So, to learn more, if you think I might be able to help your child with either their academic content or skills, test prep, essay writing, get an impact project off the ground, or really anything related to their college or scholarship application journey, feel free to sign up for a half-hour complimentary consultation with your child at crimsoncoaching.com/contact. And again, I would love it if you could subscribe to my YouTube that I mentioned. Um, Again, I'm going to ask you to please hold all your questions until after Dave's speaking. You can always put them in the chat, though. For now, I would like just to leave you with my contact information, which I'll also put into the chat. to say thank you so much for attending, and also happy Pi Day. It's tomorrow, 3/14. I know I'm super geeky, so I'll stop there.
Well, Dominique, I would echo literally everything that you said there. So, and I hadn't seen your presentation before, so I'm going to actually echo several things you said.
All right, good. Well, I'm glad. Repetition is good.
Yeah, you can make it so I am sharing my screen. And Dominique, can you just let me know, do you see scholarships for the class of 2026 and beyond? Give me a thumbs up. You're muted. There we go. All right, great. So I will start with the introduction of who I am and why I'm talking to you about scholarships. We'll talk then about the types of scholarships. We'll talk about the process for winning scholarships, why class of 2026 and beyond, and by beyond I mean younger, need to apply for scholarships immediately. We'll talk about some scholarship resources, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I am Dave Peterson. And I got into scholarships because I did not have somebody like Dominique to alert me to the fact that the cost of college had gone up 142% since I graduated. And when my son was in high school, from a very early age, he said he wanted to become a professor. So we knew he was college bound, but because I'm an idiot, I didn't think to check how much it's going to cost until he got into high school and realized, oh, okay, I need to check. And when I did, after I got myself off the floor from having the heart attack, I realized we had not saved anywhere near enough money to get him through college without substantial student loans. In fact, probably such a high amount of student loans that it just wouldn't have happened. So I knew scholarships existed, but it was not something that I took advantage of when I was in college. So I spent the next year educating myself about everything that I could find about scholarships. Got him to start applying his junior year of high school. And I'll say right up front, if we have one regret, it is that we wish we had started much sooner, because that number that you see there, that 95K, would have been much higher. Now, thankfully, it still worked out for us, but we did have some early success. He actually won 3 scholarships as a high school junior. He and I went all in, as myself as his coach. And by the time he graduated high school, he had earned about $50,000 in private outside scholarships. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what that means in case it's not clear in a moment. But put him on pause for a second. Because we live in a small-ish town, a lot of people started to hear how much we were earning in scholarships. And so friends and family started asking for help. So we got my son off to college, and for the next year, I just worked with friends and family somewhat informally, and realized that this was not just something unique to my son, that there is a process and a methodology for winning scholarships. Now, that doesn't mean that earning scholarships is guaranteed, but you can certainly give yourself a leg up by following certain processes and best practices. So circling back to my son, he continued to apply for and earn scholarships through college, and ultimately graduated not only debt-free, but we only spent $1,500 for his degree. And that's not just tuition. That was tuition, room, board, books, and fees. So literally $1,500 all in for his bachelor's degree. Because of that, all these experiences, I founded Scholarship GPS, and basically my goal is to work with parents and students, helping them achieve their own debt-free college degree. So enough about me. Let me talk about the 3 different types or categories of scholarships. I break things down into 3 buckets: need-based, based on the family's income and assets; merit-based, based on talent, maybe not the best choice of words, but we'll dissect that in a minute; and then private scholarships, which in a large part is based on the amount of time and effort a student will put into the process. So I'm going to go through these rather quickly. My guess is that most of the folks on here are not going to qualify for need-based aid. Very few families I work with do, and that's not because I'm working with multimillionaires. It's because the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, which 99.9% of the colleges use, when they fill it out, it comes back saying you're making too much money, you don't qualify, or you qualify for very little. And you can see from the numbers here, a family I worked with whose household income, so this is mom and dad's combined household income, was under $100,000, didn't have any assets to speak of. In fact, I don't think they own their home. FAFSA came back saying you should spend basically 25 grand a year for just their one student. So I know that that would have been an incredible hardship for them. I know that they would not have been able to do it. So that brings us to the second type of scholarship, which is a lot of what Dr. P was talking about, but she was talking about really these plus what we'll talk about in a moment. But these also come from the colleges themselves, and they're based on a student's talent or their resume or their abilities. Now, that can be academic, that's the most common, but there are also merit-based scholarships for athletic and artistic endeavors. So when you hear about like the star quarterback who might get a full ride to play at Florida State, that's a type of merit-based scholarship. For the rest of us who are not these star athletes, and in fact, I just interviewed somebody whose expertise is in helping students get recruited from D1 schools, and we ran some numbers, and not football, but basketball. If you are under 6'4" male, you have a 0.02% chance of getting a D1 scholarship. So just to give you some numbers of how hard it is to get a sports scholarship. So for the rest of us, we need to focus on, like what Dr. P was talking about, a higher GPA. That's going to translate to more merit aid from the college, higher test scores likewise. So that's how we're going to look at getting merit aid. And then let's look at the third category, private scholarships. These don't come from the colleges. They come from businesses and philanthropic organizations. For our family, this was 2/3 of what my son earned. So incredibly important. One of the things that drives me crazy online is I see supposed experts saying, don't bother applying for private scholarships. They're too hard to win. Well, if I had followed that advice, we would be in a lot of debt right now. So thankfully, I ignored the experts and chose my own path. And we'll talk about some of my other students in a minute, but I think they're happy they did as well. Some people are surprised to learn that some of these scholarships will actually pay the student directly. So while, of course, I suggest that these funds still be used for college purposes, it gives you a little more flexibility. Maybe you could pay for books or even things like travel to and from college, I think is a legitimate expense. The best part, in my opinion, about private scholarships is that they can be used at any college in the country. It's your money. And if the student transfers, which about a quarter to a third of students do during their college career, those funds still follow you. Unlike merit scholarships, if you move from school A to school B, you might pick up some merit scholarships at your new school, but much less likely than incoming first-year student. So we talk a little bit about some of my other students. This is Talon. He graduated last year, class of 2024. He's from Texas, and his mom, Audria. She calls him a very average student, and I think that's very fair. Super nice kid, very hardworking, but not your class valedictorian, not your 36 ACT or 1600 SAT kid. But what he did have was a great personal narrative, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's kind of, Dominique was using slightly different language, but we're speaking the same language essentially. 99% of his scholarship earnings came from private scholarships, and he has earned to date over $111,000 in scholarships. And I say so far because he continues to apply for scholarships, just like my son did. And I just want to stress the point that if you don't get everything by the time the student graduates high school, the game's not over. There are still tons of scholarships to apply for all the way through college. The game's only over once you graduate and you have the student loan bill coming in. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter from my perspective, and I don't think anybody watching this, which of these sources we get the funds from. We just want to get as close to a full ride as we can. We want to get through debt free if we can, and of course, keep our family savings intact. So that's my big goal when I am working with clients. So how do you win scholarships? Well, I think there's 5 steps. First, you have to find them. When I say that, people are like, yeah, duh, of course. But people are coming to me all the time saying, where do I find them? So here are some sources. There's about a dozen, maybe 15 scholarship websites that I tap into basically every day. Scholarships.com is kind of my first go-to, although that could be changing. They are having a hard time keeping their database as updated as I would like. You can also just jump on Google and do a search for scholarships for, and then describe the student. And that would be from things that you would think would be important, like scholarships for future accountants or scholarships for students in Massachusetts. But it can also be trivial things like scholarships for tall people or scholarships for left-handers. Those are real scholarships, believe it or not. Hopefully your school counselor will be a good resource. but your mileage may vary. School counselor's actual primary job in most high schools is more of a therapist and psychological and kind of keeping the peace in some cases. And for some school counselors, scholarships is low on their priority, but hopefully your school will keep track of some. As Dr. P said, your college is a great resource, of course, for merit aid, which in most colleges is automatically considered with your admissions application. But there are some exceptions to that that you want to be aware of. And then departmental scholarships, which Dr. P emphasized, and I will concur with that. That was a big piece of the college aid that my son got was through his department. Philanthropic organizations, the VFW is my favorite scholarship for every high school student. You don't have to be a veteran. You don't have to have any affiliation with veterans. And they actually just opened their Voice of Democracy contest for high school students yesterday. And it is not due until October 31st, so plenty of time to work on it. I do want to throw a quick plug for myself in. More than half of my students who apply for that scholarship earn monetary rewards of varying amounts. So that's one that I recommend for every high school student. And then you'll see my little logo down there. This is a piece of what I do. I don't want to say fully take it off of the student or the parent's plate, but I'll take a lot of it off because I know where to find the scholarships and can be a resource for that. So secondly is filtering that list. If you spend any time looking for scholarships, you will see that there are tons out there, far more than you could hope to apply for. So you need to filter it. How do you do that? Well, I use a concentric circle model where the student is the center or the bullseye, and we'll work from the outside in. So check eligibility. Could we actually win this scholarship? Do we qualify? What's the due date? Did I find this scholarship that's due tomorrow with a 2,000-word essay on a topic I don't know about? We're just going to skip that. Maybe we'll apply next year if we're still eligible, but we're not going to do a good job, so we're going to skip it. But we're also not going to work on a scholarship, maybe like the VFW, that's not due for, 5-6 months, because there are lots of other scholarships that we could work on in the meantime. So you want to find that sweet spot where you can, kind of churn through as quickly as you can while still doing a good job. Probably want to prioritize local scholarships. The idea for this filtering process is we want as little competition as possible. And the local scholarships, just that geographic restriction, means I am facing less competition. We can also bump scholarships up on our list if they have multiple prizes and multiple winners. My favorite example of that is the Burger King scholarship, only open for high school seniors, but they accept 50,000 applications, which is a ton. But then you find out they this year are awarding 4,200 prizes. So let's just say they picked at random, you would have a 1 in 12 shot. If you have a good application, your odds increase. Little counterintuitively, you want to perhaps focus a little bit more on smaller scholarships. Most students don't apply for scholarships. So that's, if you're applying, you're at least giving yourself a shot. But of those who do, most of those kids are going to apply for maybe a half a dozen, and they're going for the big ones, the Coca-Colas and these $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 scholarships. They don't think it's worth their time to apply for $1,000 or $2,500. But I can tell you from personal experience with our family, as well as the students I work with, that they do add up and they are much easier to win. Ultimately, you just want to be the perfect target for the scholarship you're applying for. Which brings us to step 3, which is the application process. I talk to tons of scholarship providers every day, and they all tell me that they reject more applications than they accept. And sometimes that's as many as 90% of the applications. And the reason for that is that students simply don't follow directions. So if you follow the directions, you at least give yourself a shot at earning the scholarship. Beyond that, be professional. So nice spelling and grammar. If you're sending a resume, something that's nicely formatted. Even the email address, you want something professional, like first name, last name at Gmail or whatever provider. You don't want cool skater dude at whatever, unless you're maybe applying for a skating scholarship. That would be the exception. Be accurate and truthful in your application. If for no other reason, once let's say you're selected, they're going to ask for other information to verify what you've said in the application. And if they find out that you were lying, they're going to just say, sorry, we're taking this away. So if for no other reason, even setting ethics aside, I guess, just be accurate and truthful so that you're not spinning your wheels. I mentioned the 5 pillars or the personal narrative a minute ago, and this really is, I think, the kind of secret sauce for scholarships. So I consider the 5 pillars academics, extracurriculars, volunteering, leadership, and work or employment. But as Dr. P was saying, this is not a checklist. So you don't have to have a job. If you do, it's great. But what you really want to do as you're building out your resume is to be able to tell a story. And usually that story relates to your future college major and career. So I'll use my son as an example. So I said he wanted to be a professor. His specific interest was history. So he, of course, he did well in his history and social studies courses. So academically, that was something he could point to. He took advanced courses in history, as some other subjects as well, but of course in history. Then he was in the high school history club. Senior year, he became the president, so there's a leadership role. And then he volunteered at our town's history museum. So that was a way to demonstrate in a community service way his interest in history. Now, those are just some of the highlights, but you can see he didn't have something in all 5 pillars. He didn't have a job related to history. I don't know what a 17-year-old job for history would even be, but you can see that it's more about the story and really demonstrating interest, particularly outside of the classroom, in whatever your narrative is going to be. Step 4, you need to keep track of everything. This is very important. First of all, I say check regularly, and people ask me quite often, how much time should my students spend on scholarships? Well, it's going to depend on where they're at in school. Believe it or not, there are scholarships that elementary school students can apply for. Now, there's not a ton, and I would not expect them to write a 2,000-word essay in 4th grade. Neither does the scholarship. But there are things like art contests and even scholarships that do look at academics for elementary students. But if they're just doing 1 or 2 a year, I think that's fantastic. By middle school, even the same thing, 2 or 3 a year would be great. Freshman year of high school, maybe a couple more. But by senior year, I want my students that I'm working with to at least be checking into the world of scholarships either every day, 30 minutes a day, or 3 hours a week. More is even better. The more you put into it, like anything, the more success you're likely to have. But I feel like 30 minutes a day or 3 hours a week for a senior, I don't know if I want to say it's the minimum, but I think that's what you want to shoot for. Know the expected announcement date. You're probably not going to be told if you didn't win a scholarship, but you do want to be checking your email and your spam folder every day, just so that you don't miss that notification. And we'll talk about why in a second. Scholarships are offered on a regular basis, typically annually. So if you've applied this year and you're eligible next year, by all means, put it back on your list so it filters back up when it opens up again. You've done most of the work. You could perhaps even use the same essay if it's essay based and if it's the same prompt. Although if you didn't win, you probably would want to tweak it a little bit to make it as good as you could the second time around. You also want to try to figure out who won and why. And in fact, you could shift this back to the step 3, the application phase. If last year's winners and last year's winning essays or their bio is on the website, learn everything you can. That's going to give you a lot of clues about what the scholarship is looking for. And the more you can replicate that, not copy it, but look like that person on paper, you're giving yourself a better shot. Which brings us to step 5, winning scholarships. So if you win just one scholarship, what I'm about to say is probably not too important, except for that first piece, is follow the claim instructions immediately. Scholarships have a very small window to claim your prize. One scholarship one of my students won, I guess it's been 2 years ago now. She had to reply in 72 hours or she would have lost it. So that's that reason to be checking your email every day in your spam folder every day. If it's a renewable scholarship, know what those requirements are. Typically, that's going to be maintaining a certain GPA in college, but there could be other things. So you just want to be aware of that. Going back to those thank you letters and emails that Dr. P mentioned, I concur with what she said about teachers, but also send one to your scholarship provider. I'll bring up Talon again. So Talon got invited to the company headquarters of one of the scholarships he won. He got to meet with the C-level execs, and one of them really liked him so much that he now has an internship with this company. I guarantee he would not have been invited to company headquarters if he did not send a thank you. So there's some selfish reasons to send those thank yous beyond just common courtesy. Finally, use the funds wisely. I already said I think that your funds should be used for college in some way, but really what I'm talking about here is if you build a bank of scholarships and you don't need all those funds, say first year of college, know how each one is structured so that you could reach out and say, thank you very much. We don't need it this year. We understand we can defer it till year 2 and 3. And that way you get every dime that you're entitled to. So, why should high school students of all ages apply for scholarships immediately? Money for college, that's the main thing. I concede that everything else I'll say here is secondary to that. I already said that some scholarships will pay the student directly, so it can be a little kind of extra side gig if you want to look at it that way for the student. Winning a scholarship is a great resume enhancer, and it doesn't matter if it's the most famous one's probably Coca-Cola, or it's Bob's local scholarship. It still looks great on a resume because, like I said, most students don't even bother applying. If you win one, that makes you stand out from the crowd. Alumni networks and opportunities. So that's one of those reasons for sending those thank yous. Beyond things like getting invited to potentially get an internship, several scholarships offer things like monthly webinars for incoming college students to kind of help them transition through the process. Many of them will offer mentorships and just some other things beyond the financial reward. Improved writing skills. I've kind of alluded to essays a couple times. While there are some no essay scholarships that I recommend in terms of they're legit and they do pick winners, I only recommend them because they take 30 seconds. But for most scholarships, it's going to require an essay or some type of project, which the more you write, the better writer you're going to be, which will be helpful academically, especially as you're going into college. Applying for scholarships is great preparation for the college application process. As Dr. P said, sometimes you can even repurpose some of your essays, but just the process itself, gathering those materials like your resume so that you can know what you want to talk about. It is a very similar process, and it's a great way to kind of ease into things if your student is not already, looking at that upcoming in a couple months. Students who apply for scholarships do put in a lot of time and effort, and therefore they're more invested in college, especially compared to the kid who's getting a student loan. And let's be honest, a 17-year-old does not understand what $100,000 in student loans really looks like. It just looks like free money falling out of the sky today. They can't see themselves in 5, 10, or 20 years. But the kids who've put in the time and effort to earn scholarships, they've worked at it, and they're going to take college more seriously. So, I said that most people don't apply for scholarships at all, but people who do tend to wait till senior year. But by applying before senior year, you are able to be a better applicant for those big senior year scholarships, because kind of like a bell curve, scholarship offerings do peak during senior year. Now, again, you can apply earlier. There's plenty to do, and there are plenty in college, but senior year is the big year. And by starting earlier, you will be a better applicant for those big ones. And I want to point out that there are even some huge opportunities for juniors. In fact, if you have a junior in the class of 2026, there is a full ride scholarship open today that they can apply for. Now, bad news is that full tuition scholarship they can apply for. That full ride closed back in about January. But if you have class of 27, 28 or younger, be on the lookout for, it's called a Coolidge Scholarship. That is a full ride scholarship open junior year. But let's talk about that full tuition scholarship. The Brian Cameron Education Foundation offers a full tuition scholarship, covers 4 years at any college in the country. And if you look at this under what it is, you'll see things like leadership, community service, extracurriculars, academics. Sounds like 4 of those 5 pillars. So I didn't just make those things up. You're going to see that as a common theme among scholarships. Who can apply? Class of 2026 with an unweighted GPA of 3.7 or higher. So it is rather rigorous. What do they want? There's a lengthy online application, 2 letters of recommendation. So again, building those relationships with your teachers and your mentors. And then a copy of your transcript. Unofficial's fine. Now, they have 2 rounds of entry. The early application this year ends May 21st at noon Pacific. There's good reason to get into the early round, because if you don't move to the second round, you can submit a new application during the later round. So you kind of get two chances there by submitting early. The even bigger reason is that they never stay open until what they would say the end or final deadline would be, because they only accept 3,000 applications. So getting in early not only is going to give you a potential second shot, but it's going to guarantee that you at least give yourself a shot compared to the kids who are going to wait till the very end.
Dave?
So, go
I
ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention you're at about 25 minutes, and I think folks were thinking we would end at around 8, and I want to leave some time for questions.
Yep,
Um,
I'm just about
okay.
finished. Yep. So I'll hit this next slide pretty quick. Actually, I do want to show it just in case. Um, if your student doesn't have is class of 2026 or actually anywhere in high school or middle school, this is a different opportunity. It's open for them. It's an essay contest by the organization who takes care of overseas soldier cemeteries. And it's a huge prize, as you can see. So I just wanted to let you know kind of some of the other opportunities that are out there. Scholarship resources. I have a daily newsletter called Your Daily Scholarship. Monday through Friday, I feature a different scholarship. Saturday, I feature those no essay weekender scholarships, I call them. And Sundays, I feature interviews with college prep experts like Dr. P, who was on my show just a couple weeks ago. I take all of that and repackage it into a weekly podcast. So however you prefer to digest the information, both of these are free resources. Beyond that, I do offer an online course called Scholarship GPS, online, on demand, bite-sized lessons, everything of those 5 steps. How do you find scholarships? How do you prioritize them? Application best practices, but of course, in much more depth than we just talked about here. So that's kind of my self-paced learning option. And then I do also do coaching. I have something I call the Scholarship Navigator, where the student and the parent have access to the course, but they get online support for questions. I will build a custom list of scholarships for them. And probably the most important piece is helping them with applications and essays. I have different programs for seniors, juniors, and then a combined program for high school freshmen and sophomores. And then I do more intensive coaching where this is where I'm basically on top of the student quite a bit, saying, here's the scholarship we're going to work on. Here is a deadline for, let's say, the first draft. And we'll go through all these milestones, and I'm really intensely coaching the student as much as possible. So those are my different programs, and that is it. I'll just leave that up for a second to share some testimonials, and I think it's a good time for questions.
Awesome. That was so helpful and chock full of information, Dave. I want to invite folks to either raise their hand virtually, like using the React tool, or use the chat. We did already get a couple of questions that were posed to me directly. So while other folks are putting in their questions into the chat, I will just address the ones that already came in to me directly, which was the difference between AP and IB. In terms of college rigor, there's really, or academic rigor, there's really no difference. Some schools offer the AP curriculum, some schools offer the IB curriculum. Many schools actually here in Florida offer both, and students wind up taking a mix of both. And there was also another question about the value of Girl Scouts. So in terms of scholarships, I'm not a scholarship coach, but Dave, maybe you want to take this one about the question was, can you elaborate more on the value of being and participating in Girl Scouts for several years prior to applying?
Yes. In fact, I'm working with 2 girls this year, both of whom got their gold award. And that, first of all, opened up some scholarships that nobody else without a gold award can apply for. So there's value just in that. But having that on their resume has made them better applicants for other scholarships. So, and yes, there's still value in participating in Girl Scouts if you don't get the gold award, but certainly that's something I'd recommend shooting for if you have the time. But again, looking at those 5 pillars, Girl Scouts is a great extracurricular and a great volunteer opportunity typically as well. So definitely.
That's great. Any other questions?
I noticed somebody said they were hoping the presentation will be shared. I believe it will, but I did want to mention I dropped a PDF into the chat. It will have links to the different programs I mentioned, including a link to the my free newsletter. So grab that if you can. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah, and I wanna say I'm actually on Dave's, newsletter list, and every day I'm just like, "This is amazing that there's all these scholarships out there." I highly encourage you all to sign up for that free newsletter.
And likewise, your newsletter is great as well. I always look forward to reading
Oh,
that. And you have, like I said, our messages are aligned so well. I feel like it's kind of a 1-2 punch. You're really helping them with that merit aid and getting their test scores up. And then I know you do some private scholarship stuff as well, but that's really where I focus basically the entirety of what I do.
yeah, and, also the getting into college, right?
Yeah,
Because if
yeah.
you're not getting into college, there's no sense in even, getting the scholarship, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Good question, and I get this a lot. How do you recognize if a scholarship is a scam? Well,
mm,
I would start by depends on where you find it. If you find it in some of these scholarship databases, they're pretty good about vetting. I'm not going to say 100%, but you can give yourself a little bit more security. But just take the name of the scholarship and do a search. And does this organization exist? Like, do they have a website? Do they have a business that's not scholarship related? That's a big giveaway. If the only thing that they're doing is promoting a scholarship and you don't see that they have customers buying widgets or services or pizzas or something, that's a good way to maybe cross it off your list. The other is if they're asking for very personal information. Now, of course, scholarships need your name and contact information and such, and they probably want your resume, but they should not be asking for a credit card or checking account information or social security numbers. So that's another telltale sign.
that's a great question.
Yeah. Yep.
And to answer the question about will this be shared? Yeah, so um I will probably be doing maybe a little bit editing of the live stream and maybe repost up to YouTube. And then I'm happy to share with you all the link once that's done. Any other questions?
I did just throw my email in the chat. That nodeccollege.com, that's my old website. You could find me on www.scholarshipgps, but I still have the old email address. How does it work if a student qualifies for need-based scholarship but also in private? Good question. So that the answer to that, what you're alluding to, is known as either scholarship displacement or scholarship stacking. And the answer to that is going to vary from college to college, from scholarship to scholarship, and from the need-based component as well. Some schools will start at the bad end of the spectrum. They practice what's called full scholarship displacement, which means for every dollar of private scholarship the student brings in, they lose a dollar of aid at that college. Thankfully, that's not the norm, but there are colleges out there. The full other end of the spectrum is what's called stacking, where students, for every dollar they bring in, just stacks on top of, even to the point where some colleges will send a refund check. I showed Talon's picture earlier. He just got a $24,000 refund check from his college. So, those are the two ends of the spectrum. Most schools fall more in the middle. I will say, if you're getting need-based aid, that would be the one I'd be most concerned about displacement with, because to me, that one actually does make sense. If you quote need $1,000 and you get it from an outside scholarship, you don't need it anymore. But I do not appreciate the schools who are saying, if you earn $1,000, we're taking it $1,000 off your merit aid. To me, that seems completely unfair. So my personal thing, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, but I would not go to a school that practiced that. That's just me. But your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I echo your sentiments on that. I would feel the same.
Yeah. You don't want to penalize people for working hard.
Um, this looks like a direct message to me. Um, I'm not sure whether it's, the question is how receptive do students find my guidance? I guess that's perhaps what it is. Right, okay. Uh, it really depends on the student, right? Some kids, and it depends on what they're coming to me for. I wear a lot of different hats, right? Tutoring, test prep, college applications. Um, you know, some students who, for example, are doing really poorly in school or who got a really low SAT score are sometimes feeling either ashamed or they lack confidence, and they can really kind of they come to me with, I think, a certain amount of trepidation. However, I like to say my winning personality weighs them, wins them over. I think it's what I've heard from parents about when I've been successful with kids, it's because they say that I'm very non-judgmental. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes students have gone through school feeling very judged by the education system, whereas I just kind of approach students like, okay, you got a 960 on your SAT. We can raise that. Let's get to work, right? Um, in terms of, a younger student, perhaps with the college counseling, yes, I think you're right that many students may say, why do I need this? There does need to be, I think, a little bit of buy-in from the student because I think, I never like to waste parents' money, right? And if a kid is completely shut off, then it's not going to be productive. However, usually, well, what I always do is I always meet with parent and student for a half hour for free before I sign anybody up because I want to get to know them, and also I think it's important that the kid gets to know me, that they, who knows what they might be thinking this person is, right? And then they meet me. I got the crazy curly hair. I'm Italian. I talk with my hands. They maybe you sometimes see that I'm not so bad, right? So I've never really had a kid who, after meeting me once or twice, has been completely unwilling to meet with me again. If I did, I guess I would be in the wrong business and I wouldn't have a business for 11 years, right? I think I really love kids and love what I do. So, other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate seeing people, new friends, old friends, relatives, and others. It's really been so nice having you join us. And thank you to Dave for sharing your amazing wealth of knowledge with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and learned a lot from you as well. And like I said, what you're saying, wholeheartedly agree, and it's going to help students with scholarships as well.
Awesome. Great. All right. Have a great night, everybody.